Welcome to Talking Giants, presented by SeatGeek. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner, here by myself. It's a solo show. It's the first time I've ever done a solo show on Talking Giants. I've done them before. I think I did a couple on Simple Man Radio. So not my first time, but it's been a long time. Justin is sick. Justin's got to deal with some stuff, so he said he couldn't make it. And I always could go to Danny King and the Football Grump, but I kind of just wanted to try my hand at solo, like see if I could do a full podcast. Now, I think I'll be able to put together a good podcast. I have 10 pages of notes. My worry is that this is going to last 25 minutes long. And I'm like, whoops, that you just breezed through that. You basically just read straight through your notes. And I made my notes more of a script. But I wanted to try it out. So let me know what you guys think. So we got a mailbag. Giants haven't made a signing in a week, since Friday last week. I'm hoping that they don't sign anybody tonight after this podcast is finished. They restructured Dexter Lawrence's contract. They converted $10 million into a signing bonus, so that creates $7.5 million for this year, and then added $2.5 million of cap hit on the next 3 seasons. We knew that was coming. I don't think this really signals they're going to do anything more than vet minimum signings, or barely more than the vet minimum signings. I don't know what Tre'Davious White would get. I know he visited the Giants, but I think they're kind of in vet minimum land until the draft. Now they did sign A'Shawn Robinson the Tuesday before the draft, so it's not a foregone or the Monday before the draft. So it's not a foregone conclusion that if they make a big signing, it has to happen in these next couple, this next week, right? But I do think they're going to be bargain bin hunting to fill, like they need to fill corner. I think they should probably try and bring in the safety. I still think they need to bring in bodies on the offensive line. I think they only have 8 to 10 offensive linemen right now. And then the only signing they did make was bringing back Darnay Holmes, the 4th-round pick from 2020. Started the first 2 years with Patrick Graham, and he started the 3rd year under Wink Martindale, but it wasn't a very good fit. And then this last year was relegated to the bench for the most part and played special teams. I think it's a good signing. Obviously, Shane Bowen plays a good amount of zone. He plays his fair share of man too. But Darnay is a playable player. He's never going to be an advantage no matter what scheme that you're running. But I like bringing back that signing. I think nickel corner is a bigger need than more people make it out to be, because I don't have all the faith in the world in Cordell Flott. I think in this defense that's going to have 2 high safeties a lot more, that nickel corner is going to have to be a big part of the run defense. And I think Cordell Flott, not that he couldn't get better and learn, but I've never seen someone just blow responsibilities in zone coverage so often, to the point where I would send cut-ups of plays to coaches. Like, what is this coverage? Is Cordell Flott just not doing the right thing? And they'd be like, yeah, I don't know what that is. It must be that he's making a mistake. Which sometimes you forget when you're watching film. Like, hey, there's a very good chance that this person didn't just have a physical mistake. He had a huge mental mistake. Like Evan Neal in the last play before the half versus the Bills. You're like, what is he looking at? Well, he probably shouldn't have audible to that run. But if Evan Neal just blocks the right guy, then you probably have a touchdown. And we're talking about all the balls on Schoen Daboll to call a run down there with no timeouts left. So, but you can obviously fix mental mistakes. And then a few guys left. Jihad Ward went to the Vikings. Jihad Ward wasn't very good. He was a good set the edge type run defender, but he wasn't a playmaker in the run game, just too slow for it. With Wink Martindale gone, that was obvious. Matt Parrott signed with the Broncos. Matt Parrott, man, he's like the cookie cutter tackle, but never worked out. And then Paris Campbell to the Eagles, which I actually think can be a halfway decent signing for them, because they have A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. There'll be more space for him to operate, but it obviously just didn't work with the Giants. So, going to get into the mailbag first. This episode was brought to you by some special people. We got Jason, just regular old Jason. That's my brother's first name, not his last name. Bud Power, which I don't know if that's a real name, but that's a good name, whether it's like you just like your Budweiser or it's the power of the buds. And then Byron Williams, which is actually William Byron, is a NASCAR driver who's been on this show as a friend of Daniel Jones. So I don't know if there's any relation. I highly doubt it. Those people went to patreon.com/talkinggiants. It's $2 a month. You get a free sticker. You get to enter shirt raffles and all that good stuff. So patreon.com/talkinggiants. All right. Take it away, Steve.
Mail time.
Mail time. The mail's here. Come on. Bye, guys.
Here
Here's the mail, it never fails. It makes me want to wag my tail. When it comes, I want to wail.
Thanks, Steve from Blues Clues. Bobby, let's get into the mail. I think that's the first time I have to read the mailbag questions. First question, Robert Pupkin. There's a world where the Giants don't select a QB in this draft and don't have a high pick next year to take one. What does a solution at QB look like when playing the long game? Could Jones actually live to see another year in blue as a bridge if he bounces back this season? So this is the thing that puts pressure on you to go and get JJ McCarthy. Everything points to Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Jaden Daniels being off the board in the top 3 picks by the 3 teams that hold those picks, with the Commanders and Patriots at 2nd and 3rd. Everything is pointing to that. So it's JJ McCarthy is most likely the next quarterback off the board, and we know the Vikings are working to trade up for that. That is the thing that truly does put the most pressure on you, because the thought is like, hey, you're not in a position like that. Maybe next year's QB class isn't good, and you're not in a position to get the top QB in that class anyways, and you end up as Chris Ballard in the Colts, right? 2019, Andrew Luck retires. You have Jacoby Brissett, leads them to a 7-9 team. Then they get Phillip Rivers in 2020, leads them 11-5 and a playoff loss. Then the next year, they trade for Carson Wentz, leads them to 9-8 and misses the playoffs. And then 2022, you get trade for Matt Ryan. You go 4-12-1. Frank Reich gets fired, which this regime is looking to avoid, is getting fired. Matt Ryan was by far the dumbest move that they made. He was washed. And then in 2023, 4 years later, they're able to draft Anthony Richardson. So that's a long time to go without getting a quarterback. Right, and the Giants roster isn't good, so they're not going to be a team that is right in the playoff hunt every year just off of roster talent alone. Like, they kind of need elite or really good quarterback play to save the day. And I think Brian Daboll is a really good offensive coach, though, and I'm sure he can do some good things with JJ McCarthy. But they right now, the Giants, they are looking at that DJ contract and wish they didn't do it. But they felt they had no other choice. But I don't want them to make the same mistake as, hey, we had no other choice. We had to sign Daniel Jones. There was no other quarterback option. Just let us to the playoffs. We're betting on him. Are they going to look at JJ McCarthy and say the same thing? Like, hey, we kind of have no other choice. That being said, the next year's QB class, like an argument that I've seen, which isn't the worst argument, but I don't agree with this argument, is that, hey, next year's QB class, JJ McCarthy will be QB1, and we probably won't be a good spot for him anyway, so you take the quarterback now. Well, first of all, quarterbacks pop up. Where was Jaden Daniels projected to go this time last year? Not at the top of the first round, not 2nd and 3rd overall, not Dan Orlovsky saying he's better than Caleb Williams. The year before, Anthony Richardson was on the radar, but that was he barely had played any games. That was based off of traits alone. And I hadn't heard his name, before the draft. It was, once the draft settled and you're looking to the next quarterback class. Also, imagine you're a Chicago Bears fan and you're in 2021, right? And you're saying, when are we going to get the quarterback? We have to draft Justin Fields or Mac Jones or the Patriots. Like, we've got to draft Mac Jones because, you know what? He would be QB1 in the next class. The next class is made up of Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, and Sam Howell. We can't pass up on this QB class, and then you're stuck with Mac Jones, and they're trading him for a 6th-round pick 3 years later. So to me, that's why that's not a good argument. You cannot use next year's QB class being bad to make a decision in this year's class. So long story short, this is why I don't feel good about the Giants QB spot long term, right? Because it's going to be hard for them. Like, there's no easy answer for them to do this besides trading up or taking JJ McCarthy's there, but I don't think that's the correct answer. So falling out of the top 3 really hurts, right? Like that, it sucks that the Giants fell out of the top 3 when they were in position to be a top. They were never going to have the first pick because of the Carolina Panthers. But man, there was a real shot that they would have ended up with the 2nd pick, and we wouldn't be in this situation. But obviously, we know that coaches and players aren't going to tank. But it's why it was the first time ever where I openly acknowledged, like, yeah, I want them to tank because, like, this is a situation where it calls for it. Now, I knew they weren't going to tank. I didn't actually, but I wanted them to lose games at that point. So falling out of the top 3 really hurts, but I don't want to sacrifice the roster getting better to have what I view as a short-term hope with JJ McCarthy, because I truly don't think you set your ceiling as a Super Bowl contender because you have JJ McCarthy. I think if you have a great roster and you add JJ McCarthy, you can be a Super Bowl contender eventually. But I don't think JJ McCarthy is going to pitch you in the running for a Super Bowl, every year the way that Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, those guys at least have you in the conversation if your roster is halfway decent. I don't think JJ McCarthy's ever going to be that. I think Caleb Williams will be that. Drake May, I think he will be that. Jaden Daniels, I don't think he will be that. But man, he's got all the ability in the world to be that, right? His athleticism, the arm, he has all that ability in the world to be that. I just don't view JJ McCarthy like that, and I'm just not taking that guy at 6. Right? It's not because, we got to build around. I'm out on Daniel Jones, and we'll talk about that later. But I'm just not going to sacrifice the long term for the short term, right? I just feel like that is them trying to save their jobs because they're in a shitty situations. So that's where I'm at with the what's the plan at quarterback? I admit it's a rough situation. If the Giants draft JJ McCarthy, we'll break down the film. We'll talk about him when there will be good moments and stuff right there. I just don't think you're going to have that sustained great quarterback play with him. And that's why not being in the top 3 hurts so freaking much. All right, next question. Definitely not a cop at RJ Mills 12. This guy is definitely not a cop. I think he is a cop. We had a run-in. This is my instincts. 2 years ago at training camp, we were basically the only people in the parking lot in the van waiting to interview somebody. And the cops rolled up on us, and I was like, I jumped out, and I'm like, we're allowed to be out, getting ready to be, we're allowed to be here. And they were like, hey, big fans of the show. And they gave us a pat, like a Giants pat. I might have it somewhere. I know where it is, and it's not, I don't know. But they gave us like a New York Giants, New Jersey State Police patch, which was very cool. So I was ready to, I know my rights then, but they were very nice. So definitely not a cop. Ask, why do you guys not mention Jermaine Eluemunor as a starter for guard? Depending on how Evan Neal improves, Eluemunor said in an interview he would love to play right guard and can play anywhere along the line. Wouldn't Thomas, Runyon, JMS, Eluemunor, Neal be a more likely initial O-line group? So I did listen to that interview that he had with John Smilk, and he basically was just saying that I just want to play, and he'll train to be the best at that spot. Said he could care less. He just wants to play. He'll train at whatever spot that they tell him. I'm not saying the Giants aren't going to do this, but I wouldn't do this, and they haven't said that they're going to do this. So I went through Jermaine Eluemunor's career. In 2023, he started 17 games at off. I did games with more than 10 snaps. So not, coming in after a blowout or something. 2023, 17 games at offensive tackle. 2022, 16 offensive tackle, 1 at guard. 2021, 4 at guard. 2020, 9 at offensive tackle. He didn't play in 2019, or at least not more than 10 snaps a game. 2018, 2 games at offensive tackle, and then his rookie year, 2017, 5 games at guard. So in total, 44 games at offensive tackle, 10 at guard. So over 80% of his NFL career has been at offensive tackle. I don't think it's off the table. I just think it's a bad idea. Guys need to play. The Giants need to put guys in their spot that they were paid to play or drafted to be. What happens if you have Jermaine Eluemunor at guard and Neal at offensive tackle in camp? How long is the leash for Evan Neal? Right? What if Evan Neal's struggling? How long do you wait to we're going to put Jermaine as the starting tackle? How often are you making Jermaine practice at tackle while he's taking first team reps at guard? Is he taking all of the second string reps at tackle and then at guard? What happens if something happens in the middle of a game? How does that hurt John Michael Schmitz not getting used to the same guy next to him? To me, the Giants need to stop fucking around with the offensive line. Get starters and get backups. That is what the New York Giants need to do with this offensive line. Get your starters and then get your backups. If a backup is a swing guy at both of the guards or both of the tackles, that's fine. Now, they did get a backup center in Austin Schlottman from the Vikings. Good. It's a 2-year contract too, so it shows that they like him a little bit more than just a 1-year vet minimum contract. Get another starting guard and hopefully add a depth or starter in the draft. And that's why I wanted Ben Bredeson back so much. Well, I said he should have been one of the Giants' top priorities to bring back, and I think it's a mistake that you let him go, unless you get a similar player in the rest of free agency, and they just haven't done that yet. And you cannot bet on the draft of filling that need. You're not taking one at 6, right? We're not taking any offensive line at 6, most likely not, at least not at guard. And you can't put yourself in a position where you just have to take any position in the draft with 6 picks, or really if they had 10 picks. Like, I just don't think you could put yourself in that position. Don't put yourself in a position, in a situation where you have so say it's the second round, you have a defensive tackle, which is a need on the Giants, graded higher, right? Way higher than the best guard that's available, but you take guard because of the need. If you had Ben Bredeson, you could start him at guard. But if best player available is at guard at pick 47 or 50, then you can take that guard and let him compete to start. So I don't think you can go into the draft with that need, right? Like, I'd love to get out of this draft with Christian Haynes out of UConn, but if there's a guy who I view much higher to be a better NFL contributor, I don't want to be forced to take Christian Haynes, especially when rookie guards almost exclusively struggle. Also, there's a really good chance that Eluemunor is your best right tackle, right? If we're going off of this past year, Jermaine Eluemunor is your best right tackle on the roster, so you're going to put him at guard. There's also a chance that Andrew Thomas misses games again, so now you're going to he's been practice. Say it's week 5, Andrew Thomas gets injured, he's going to miss 3 games. So now you take your starting right guard for 4 games, who's been practicing only guard since the 3rd week of training camp, working on the right guard. That's all he's been practicing at. And then Andrew Thomas goes down, like, okay, now you have to go to left tackle, and now we don't have good depth at guard, so we're going to have to put Josh Ezeudu or Aaron Stinney, both guys who haven't proven to be, even average guards in the NFL, in the starting lineup. Stop messing around with this offensive line. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in this show too. But just stop, take it seriously, right? Then we have a question you would ask Joe Schoen, and it would involve this, because I feel like they just need to go look at someone who's a guy who started games in the NFL for a couple 2-3 years, right? I just don't think they've really invested that much into the guard spot outside of John Runyon, and I don't want to take a tackle and put him at guard. I just don't want to do that. I know he's played guard 10 games in his career, but at the end of the day, he is a tackle in the NFL. Next question. Next question is actually from Bobby at NB number 23. With misevaluation of Jones, are you now apprehensive about Schoen and Daboll's ability to evaluate QBs? Good question. I don't worry about their evaluation, but I do worry about the pressure to find a quarterback. Like that first question we asked about JJ McCarthy. I don't think they are going to misevaluate JJ McCarthy. I think that they're going to have the pressure to pick JJ McCarthy with the need. It's a lot easier for me to sit back here and say, be patient and build a roster. But Joe Schoen just doesn't have the roster, one, that gives him a high floor to keep, and his job, he doesn't have the roster that gives him a high floor, and his job is on the line, right? So it'd be one thing if they had this roster that is going to make you win games no matter who's at quarterback for the most part, but they don't have that. So like we said before, a good chance they don't have a first-round QB after 4 years on the job, right? Let's say, and we'll talk about Daniel Jones in a second. Let's say they win 7 games next year. They go 7-10. That's not a good season, but they would most likely be back for year 4. Well, then they're going to year 4, and they probably don't have a first-round QB that they're going to take. And after 4 years on the job, will they be doing enough, which would include making the playoffs, to survive marijuana to fire them? Right after 4 years, if they miss the playoffs for 3 straight years, you don't have a young quarterback on the roster that you've been developing and has signs of moving up. Well, I just don't trust that Mayor's going to have the restraint to not fire them. And if you go back and listen to all our Daniel Jones talk from 2022 and 2023, from 2022, the season, and then the 2023 offseason, whether that was game recaps, film reviews, pre-contract and then the contract being signing. I think there's some stuff that people are missing that leaves a lot of gray areas, both negative and positive, when it comes to Daniel Jones. First, and we'll go with the positive, Daniel Jones is not as bad as he was in 2023. And I'm out on Daniel Jones, but he wasn't as bad as what he was last year. The offensive line was truly unbearably bad. It was unbearable. It was the worst offensive line that I've ever seen without Andrew Thomas, right? And the stats show it, right? When you look at the QB's pressures, it's like amount of pressure and time to pressure. Daniel Jones had the most pressure per snap and the quickest time to pressure in the NFL. And a lot of those plays, we did a mailbag in season, broke down. He was getting pressure from multiple guys, right? If you're pressure, you can get accounted for one pressure on one play, but it's different when you're getting pressure from two different players. So and I just want to kind of go game by game for Daniel Jones because there wasn't a lot. The Cowboys game was insane how bad it was, but DJ, offensive line wise, but Daniel Jones did miss throws in that game, right? Like there was throws he left on the table. Would they have won the game? No, but he could have been he could have been better in that game for sure. The Cardinals game was awesome, and we saw what was capable with some protection, and then the new additions of Darren Waller and Jalen Hyatt that they just didn't have those elements in 2022 when they made the playoffs. Waller was the number one tight end in receiving yards after that game, and Jalen Hyatt, he had the 2 catches for 89 yards. He created space for Darren Waller. He created space for Darius Slayton to have some big plays on crossers, right? So, hey, this is what's capable with Daniel Jones, Brian Daboll, and now that you have some new offensive weapons. Then the 49ers kind of put out the blueprint for the Giants offense. They showed off-zone coverage pre-snap, right? And their four-man rush was killing it, right? So they knew that they were going to be able to get to the quarterback without blitzing, rushing forward. It was down in, down out. They were able to win up front, and they played off zone. So you're not having these shot plays that you can set up, and they were just driving on everything because the Giants were throwing quick game the whole game because they were pre-snap off man, no blitzes. There wasn't not a ton of opportunities to sit there and try and push the ball down the field. Now, Daniel Jones, there was one play where I think he could have pulled the trigger to Jalen Hyatt that could have led to a big play. He missed Darren Waller on that third down. But hey, Waller popped up an interception in that game. Daniel Jones, I don't walk away from that game and go, oh, Daniel Jones, what the hell? I do look at the offensive line in that game. The Seahawks game was a disaster for Daniel Jones. DJ created sacks. He missed multiple opportunities for plays. He had the pick six that was one of his worst throws ever that lost him the game. Truly one of his 5 worst games in the NFL ever. Then the Dolphins game he actually played well in my opinion, but the offensive line pressure was nuts. Darren Waller dropped 2 big plays in a game that, including a touchdown, and then he gets injured in that game. But, you go back and watch the film, and I don't think anyone that watches film doesn't have a problem with Daniel Jones in that game. Comes back from the neck injury. Raiders game, comes back. He's making great reads. He's making good decisions, but he's throwing the ball downfield, and he's just flat out missing like we've never seen outside of some outlier games for him. So, long story short, is Daniel Jones is not as bad as 2023. The big thing we learned, though, this past season, that was what was our biggest worry when DJ signed the contract was this. DJ played damn near flawless football in 2022. I'm serious. Watch other QBs that are great and clearly better than him, and DJ was operating the offense flawlessly, except the hole shots versus cover 2 on the sideline when they run a high-low read. He wouldn't pull the trigger on those. And then the first 2 games of the season versus the Titans and then the Panthers, despite the fact that they won those games, those are probably Daniel Jones' 2 worst games of the season. There were chunk plays that there to be had, and DJ just was not throwing that. Now, he played well week 3 Dallas with a similar game plan despite awful offensive line, wide receivers dropping big passes, but they changed the offense after that. Now, this was the context in that, from the outside looking in. The offensive line wasn't very good in 2022. It wasn't bad as 23, but it wasn't very good. And so that hinders, trying to take big plays, which the Giants just did. When Daniel Jones wasn't passing up a lot of deep shots, there was a good handful throughout the season. But for the most part, they weren't even putting those plays on the menu. And our questions were, is that because of the offensive line? Was it because Darius Slayton was your only threat to create a play over 20 yards? And they wrongfully benched him to start the season. The question was, why is it? Is it because Daniel Jones won't throw it? Is it because they only have one vertical threat in Darius Slayton, and if they shade the safety over there, you have nobody that you can throw the ball to unless it's a double move? Or is it because the offensive line isn't protecting to get the guys who aren't big play threats, but get guys in zone, put defenders in conflict, and then have guys open, right? Which is a part of the equation with that. So, but the question was, would DJ take the big play risks when they were there with added weapons of Waller and Hyatt? And we got the answer. That the answer is no in 2023. They tried and he didn't deliver. For that reason, and not the injury, is why I'm out on Daniel Jones. Is that, hey, I don't expect to go back and watch those games. If we replayed that season, do I expect the Giants to be better than 1-5 with the personnel they had at offensive line? Yeah, I actually think they could have been 2-4. I think they should have beat the Seahawks. Defense played really well that game. There was opportunities there. So yes, I think there's one game. Do I expect them to, if DJ makes the throws that were there, do I expect them to win those games? Nope. I don't expect them to beat Dallas. I don't expect them to beat San Francisco, and I don't expect them to beat Miami. But Seattle is a game that they should have won if Daniel Jones had played better to a reasonable ask. So the next component of this, though, with Daniel Jones and a little more positive, is the second half of 2020 and 2020-21 was not much different for Daniel Jones than what he was in 2022 when they made the playoffs. The main thing he improved on with Brian Daboll was creating more with his leg, but the biggest difference was just not having Jason Garrett and having Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka. The film truly shows that if you go back and watch 2020 and 2021. Now, that comes with 2 bad games versus the Bucs and somewhat the Rams game, but that wasn't like a totally awful game, but he had 2 interceptions in that game that were 2 interceptions, but they were like, there's different levels of interceptions. Is there the misthrow interceptions, which Daniel Jones doesn't really do very often, where he just he's inaccurate? Is there the, hey, this is a bad decision, but I see how you're baited into it? That was the Rams game. And then there's like the what the fuck type of throws, which showed up in the Bucs game where he's throwing a screen and to a defensive lineman's chest, and those type of throws. That's what the Rams game was. He had 3 interceptions in that game. One was Sterling Shepard setting down. But like, he had fixed his he's the turnover king, because everyone brings up his rookie stats and how much the fumbles, weigh into that. He had fixed the turnover issue after Monday Night Football versus the Bucs in 2020. From the second half of 2020 through 2021, he had 7 interceptions in 18 games. And then here's what 3 of those 7 were. Evan Ingram versus the Cowboys, the last game of 2020, literally just pops up a ball for an interception. A Hail Mary versus the Saints, and then Sterling Shepard flipping versus the Rams. So 4 at-fault interceptions in 18 games is truly amazing. And then we saw him repeat that with Brian Daboll, where he had the best interception rate in the NFL. So you look at the touchdown numbers, though, they're very low. And I challenge people over those 2 years to find the touchdowns that he left on the board. They really weren't there. Galladay versus the Bucs was one. The Eagles game when Freddie Kitchens took over, where DJ hurt his neck on the second play, he could have thrown better fades to Galladay. But there wasn't like, when you go back and walk, if there was, they would be blasted all over by social media, by myself or Nick Flato or whoever watches film. Like, oh, he missed this opportunity for a touchdown. They just really weren't there with that talent, but mostly the scheme. So I don't think I said long. It's just a long story. So I don't think their evaluation of Daniel Jones is egregious. I think the things where I think they really screwed up in that contract is bidding against themselves, right? One, like, who else would have paid Daniel Jones that money? Nobody else would have. And even if you didn't let him hit the open market, you reset the cap percentage of mid-tier QBs. Right? Like, we talked about it. Like, I went and looked at every quarterback contract, that could be in the same tier as Daniel Jones over the last 8 to 10 years. And not their money, because the cap changes every year, but the cap percentage they got. And there was a range between like $33 and $36 million that Daniel Jones should have fit in. And honestly, with Daniel Jones' career, it should have been closer to the 33. But it's, hey, what are you willing to go up to make a deal? And I think that number was $36 million. So now I know they could have franchise tagged him, but I just don't blame them for not envisioning. Like, I don't think anyone envisioned him playing his worst stretch of football in 3 years with the best weapons that he ever had, right? Which is what happened this last year. So the main thing is they should have just not been so lazy addressing the offensive line this last offseason. So no, I don't worry about their quarterback misevaluation at all. I worry about them succumbing to the pressure to get a quarterback, which led to Daniel Jones getting more money than what he deserved. Hey, even if they signed him to a 4-year 140 instead of 160, we're still not happy about that deal. So it's still a mess up at the end of the day. All right, let me check the chat real quick while I get a sip of water. All right. We got people talking about sweet potato fries. What's going on? All right. Next question. Deek Freak 72 at JJ Deek Freak 72. What are the top 5 positions of need entering the draft? So number 1 is quarterback, right? They just need to figure that out to save them, their team, and their jobs, right? Like I talked about before. I don't think the answer is there, unfortunately, which is why I'm not super excited about this team right now. But quarterback is the biggest position of need. Interior offensive line is number 2. Right now, you have a guard in John Runyon, who is the 17th highest average annual value at the guard position, with the market exploding at guard for the first time. Right now, unless you're putting Jermaine at guard, like we talked about earlier, Josh Azudu or Aaron Stinney as a starter right now. No bueno. No bueno. I don't like that at all. Josh Azudu, Aaron Stinney, and Marcus McKeithen are your other guys right now. JMS should take a step forward, but getting good guards would be a nice help in making that step. Number 3 is cornerback. Right now, you have Deonte Banks, Cordell Flott, Darnay Holmes, and Trey Hawkins on the roster. And Nick McLeod. We're hoping Banks turns into a cornerback one, but you still need a vet or someone capable on the other side. Plus, I think a nickel is a bigger need than most do, which we talked about before. So, like you're going to need better run defense from nickel, play better zone skills, and I talked about it before. They're just not there. 4 is safety. Jason Pinnock is a fine player with really good athleticism. He's been versatile. He can move around. Really love that waiver signing by Joe Schoen. Obviously, like there's waiver additions every year, especially when your team is as bad as the Giants. But he was the only one that I'm like, oh, this guy deserves a film breakdown, right? He only started 2 games for the Jets, because he played safety. He played corner at Pitt and then moved to safety with the Jets. But I was like, I got to do film breakdown on this guy. This guy can actually play. He's versatile. Like, he could play in any spot. But he's not a number 1 safety. And Dane Belton has gotten interceptions, but I don't think he's going to be an advantage at the safety position. I think at best he'll just be a playable guy. I really like Javarius Owens as a 7th-round pick, but he played 0 defense in 2023. I wouldn't want to envision him doing anything more than a 3rd safety role in this year, too. So I think safety's... It's not the biggest position of importance, but it is a position that needs help. And then 5, wide receiver. I don't think wide receiver is the 5th weakest spot on the team, but I don't think wide receiver is really an issue for the Giants. But a true great wide receiver one does wonders for a team or quarterback. Like, they just changed the games by just existing, and the Giants haven't had that since Odell Beckham Jr. When I'm doing these film breakdowns of free agents, you're seeing what's happening on the field, even if you're not watching that player. And it's really crazy what a wide receiver one could do. Now, I was watching Justin Jefferson, watching Austin Schlottman's film, and it's just like, dude, this, like, it makes you wonder, like, is Kirk Cousins actually going to be that good in Atlanta? Because a lot of times they're just setting up play action, and it's just like, throw the ball to Justin Jefferson. He's going to get open eventually. If the protection holds up, get the ball to Justin Jefferson. So he's the best wide receiver in the NFL. You can't hold a wide receiver to that standard. But, I mean, we've seen it with Odell Beckham Jr., right? Those guys can just change games by existing, and the Giants just haven't had that, again, since 2018 with Odell Beckham Jr. So, my 5 biggest positions of need are quarterback, interior offensive line, cornerback, safety, and then wide receiver. Next question we have is from... I forgot to do notes on this next question, but I'll go quick on it. Sage and Hell Angel, at Sage_Angel, with 2 L's. I didn't do notes on this. Is Azeez tradable for anything worthwhile, or best to use him as death? Hashtag Let's Go Big Blue. I would trade Azeez if there was something out there, but I don't think there's a market for Azeez Ojulari, right? Like, if you could get a 4th-round pick, I think you consider it. But now that Brian Burns is here, Kayvon Thibodeau obviously is going to be the number 2. I think Azeez Ojulari, without the expectation of a bunch of playing time, can now become a nice little piece as your 3rd edge rusher, right? And you get him 3rd and longs, you put those 3 guys on the field, and if he has like a decent year as a backup, then you could probably retain him, because depth matters, for a decent contract. Obviously, injury is the biggest worry with Azeez Ojulari. He had a really bad year this year on the field anyways, but we also saw his rookie year was good production, but not consistency. Second year, he was actually really consistent. He just wasn't on the field, but his pass rush metrics were really good. So I would just keep Azeez Ojulari and hope he can stay healthy as depth. And if he has like a halfway decent year, maybe you can keep him for a 2-year, $10 to $11 million deal with only 1 year of it guaranteed. So I didn't do detailed notes. Like I should have went and looked at every single trade that's ever happened in the world of trades for guys in their final year of their contract. If he had 2 years left on his deal, I actually think the Giants could get something back. But with 1 year left on the deal, I don't think anyone's giving more than a day 3 pick for Azeez Ojulari, and probably a later day 3 pick. All right, next question. Doug Analytics @_Doug Analytics. If Joe Schoen gave you the keys to make all the draft picks on one day of the draft, which day would you pick? First question. If you could see the box score stats for next year for one player besides QB, who would you want to see? So for the first question, I would want to do day 3. I feel like we've been pretty good at identifying the guys who can have success on day 3, right? That also takes into account that we don't have profiles on a lot of guys either, right? That's why day 3 of the draft stream is very casual, because it's like, we don't know over half of these guys that are going. I would love to have the time to do that, but I feel like our takes on day 3 guys have been pretty solid, right? Like in 2021, I wanted Khalil Herbert. I had him as the 5th running back in that class, and the Giants passed up on him in the 6th round to go Gary Brightwell. Also would have wanted to take Trey Smith with that other 6th round pick that they had. Instead, they came out with Gary Brightwell and Rodarius Williams. I hated Ellerson Smith. We talked about him with Nick Flott. I was like, this guy just can't play the run at all. But again, I wish I had more time to find guys on day 3, but unfortunately, it's just better for us to be prepared for the top 100 picks. But I feel like we've been pretty good, right? Like Christian Izine, he's a safety for Rutgers, and Ivan Pace. Those guys were both UDFAs last year that I mocked to the Giants and wanted the Giants to get. Ty Chandler and Zach Tom were 2 guys I mocked in 2022. Ty Chandler is the number 2 back with the Vikings. Zach Tom is a starter for the Packers and has been really good. We were really high on Jake Ferguson. So I feel like we've been pretty good at identifying the day 3 guys, right? And we're not the guys who just like, oh, I love this guy, a lot of draft analysis. Oh, I love this guy. Could be a steal. Could be a steal. I actually think where we're good in our draft analysis is we're not afraid to be negative and say, hey, I don't like this guy that's going in the first round. Like at a team way out of Barre, how is this guy mocked in the first round? So I think that's actually one of our strengths, because the more like amount of like draft content, the pressure is to just like say players are good. Right, because that's what fan bases want to hear. Is like, this player's good, right? If the Giants, draft, I don't know, freaking whatever, Tez Walker in the 3rd round, you want to hear a guy, you want to go find Twitter and have a guy say, oh, this guy got so much potential. He's an early 2nd round pick. He's going to be a steal. You really don't. And then until you see them play, if anyone says anything negative about that guy, people get lit up, right? Like that's just kind of the nature of fandom. Now, day 1. If I wasn't just picking for the Giants, if it was for the show, because you always want the guy that you want on day 1 for the show, right? It's just a lot easier to talk about day 3 picks they don't like. And then, we do a whole episode on one player. You want to really have wanted that player. And it's been pretty good for talking Giants. 2020, my guy was Andrew Thomas, was thrilled. Happiest I ever been with the draft pick. 2021, I like the trade back. Right, I was happy that Devontae Smith. When people were so mad when the Eagles traded up for Devontae Smith, in my mind, I'm like, let's go, Rashawn Slater. I want Rashawn Slater. I would have even taken Elijah Vera Tucker over Devontae Smith. But when they traded back, I like that. And Tony could have been really good. Like, we like Tony. We just didn't know he's the world's biggest fucking moron. Like, he's one of the dumbest people in the NFL, if not the dumbest. We drafted that guy in the 1st round. But if you're just watching film, you don't have all the insights into that stuff like we do. I kind of like the Tony pick. Tony has more receiving yards with the Giants than the Chiefs. Isn't that a little crazy? Now, I would have preferred Kwity Paye or Christian Darrisaw over Kadarius Toney. Obviously, Darrisaw's been really good. Kwity Paye has actually been coming on as a pretty good player for the Colts. Had a really good year for them last year. 2022, I would have rather have went Okwonu at 5 and then Kayvon at 7, but was thrilled with the duo. I loved Evan Neal. Obviously, that hasn't worked. And then last year was probably the most where I didn't love it. And it wasn't because of Banks necessarily. I just didn't like the idea of trading up for Banks one spot because you had Joey Porter there. So I didn't mind the pick itself of Banks over Porter, right? Like, they're not so far apart. Like, to me, they weren't far apart enough to be like, this is an insane pick. Now, Porter did have a better rookie season, But Banks was always, and this was part of the thing about Banks, is Banks wasn't the guy who was going to come in year one and dominate, right? He's the guy who you judge after year 2 or year 3 because he has all that athletic ability and had things to clean up. Where Joey Porter Jr. to me was a little more pro ready. Now those guys were both first and second for rookie cornerbacks and penalties, by the way. But Porter did have a good rookie year, played a lot of wide receiver ones. But like you can't judge the Joey Porter Jr. versus Deonte Banks until after this season. I think you can get a good idea. Year 3 is when you can obviously be the most definitive. But my thing is I didn't like trading up for one pick when both those guys were there. There was other guys there I would have liked too, like Miles Murphy that ended up getting traded by the Bengals. And then for the depth chart part of this question, where Doug Analytics asks, if you could see the box score stats for the next year for one player besides QB, who would you want to see? So it would have to be either Kayvon Thibodeau or Jalen Hyatt. Like Jalen Hyatt, we know he has the big playability, but he has a ton of refinement to his game that's needed. Right? Like the reason he wasn't drafted, that's the reason he wasn't drafted until the 3rd round. But he's so talented. He's got the most important thing, creating the big plays. But he's in a very weird spot. If the Giants do go wide receiver at 6, despite his talent and a pretty decent size investment to trade up, trade a 4th round pick to trade up 13 spots in the 3rd round, he could be a backup, right? Which is not like a huge indictment on Jalen Hyatt. It's just that, hey, he's not better than Darius Slayton, and then we took a wide receiver at 6. And while you could give him reps in the slot, he's not going to be a slot receiver, especially in a Brian Daboll offense. But for me, it's Kayvon Thibodeau. He had the sacks this past year, but just not the consistency to go with it, right? He's 71st of 78 edges and pass rush win rate. He was 11th in total sacks for edges, but 45th out of 55 guys in total pass rush and pass rush productivity. In total sacks, hits, and pressures combined was ranked 48th for edge players. And it wasn't just, he drops back in the coverage. Like he had the 17th most pass rush snaps in the NFL. So dropping in the coverage wasn't the excuse for it. So, but Kayvon to me has a baseline as at least like a good player, right? But Kayvon needs to take a step forward. And if he has the same year he has last year, except for he replaces 5 of the sacks with quarterback hits, right? We don't face as many backup offensive tackles. Then you look at that 2022 draft, and it's a colossal failure. If Kayvon doesn't increase his production to go along with Evan Neal, what he's at, then it looks like a horrible draft, right? When we were coming away from that thinking like we won the damn draft, myself included. But that's why it's Kayvon, because Kayvon to me is much more important to the team than Jalen Hyatt. And to me, he's a player who I think could take a big step forward, right? Like, I'm not talking about like, I want to see, let me think of somebody. Eric Gray's stats. He could have 1,600. No, like someone who with reasonable, expectations to grow. Kayvon Thibodeau would be that. So, all right, next question. We got Sean at Sean2986. In your opinion, what does adding a day 2-3 quarterback add to the team? I see a lot of people just saying we need to take a QB there if we don't take one round 1, but I just can't see it being that helpful to the team. Sean, I agree with you, my friend. So I went through I didn't use last year's draft because they haven't had a chance to get any playing time. So I went from 2017 to 2022. That's 6 drafts. Day 2 quarterbacks. 2022, Desmond Ridder, Malik Willis, Matt Corral, 0 for 3. 2021, Kyle Trask, Kellen Mond, Davis Mills, 0 for 3. 2020, Jalen Hurts, 1 for 1. 2019, Drew Lock, welcome to the Giants, Will Grier, 0 for 2. And then to me, this is like you're either proven to be a solid quarterback or the team was happy with the investment they made. 2018, Mason Rudolph, 0 for 1. 2017, Deshaun Kaiser, Davis Webb, CJ Beathard, 0 for 3. Day 3 quarterbacks. 2022, Brock Purdy, Sam Howell, Bailey Zappi, Chris Olajuwon, and Skylar Thompson, 2 for 5. 2021, Ian Book, Sam Ellinger, 0 for 2. 2020, Jacob Eason, James Morgan, Jake Fromm, Jake Luton, Cole McDonald, Ben DiNucci, Tommy Stevens, Nate Stanley. Who the fuck is Nate Stanley? 0 for 8. 2019, and Jake Fromm, former Giant. Ryan Finley, Jared Stidham, Easton Stick, Clayton Thorson. Remember Clayton Thorson's preseason? Clayton Thorson was so bad that a preseason game, they're like, we got to cut him the next day. Who did they bring in? Trivia. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Michigan State's Brian Lewerke. Gardner Minshew, Trace McSorley. 1 for 6 with Minshew. 2018, Kyle Lauletta. Be careful how you drive. Mike White. Luke Falk, Tanner Lee, Danny Etling, Alex Mago, Logan Woodside. 0 for 7. I'm not counting Mike White as a hit. And then 2017, Josh Dobbs, Nathan Peterman, Brad Kaya, the U, and then Swag Kelly. 1 for 4 if you count Josh Dobbs. So day 2, through a 6-year period, has produced a 1 of 13 hit rate in over 6 years. And then day 3 has produced 4 for 32. So that is a 5 out of 45 is like, hey, we just at least got good investment. And to me, those hits are ranked Jalen Hurts, Brock Purdy, Sam Howell, Gardner Minshew, and Josh Dobbs. And guess what? Only 2 of those 5 are with the team that drafted. So where's a really good investment? Brock Purdy, we obviously has been really good. Has like the best EPA per play over the last 10 years of quarterbacks, but we know that system. Is Brock Purdy really a hit if he doesn't get drafted by the 49ers? I don't know, but we got to give it to him. And then Jalen Hurts. So there's only 2 guys that you can have in the conversation that are like quarterbacks worth paying to be a starter. So everyone brings up the outliers when it comes to day 2 and day 3 quarterbacks. So yeah, I don't want to take a quarterback on day 2 or day 3. If they don't get one in the first round, then I want us to live with Daniel Jones and Drew Lock, which is not fun. It sucks. It sucks for views of the show. It sucks for the team. But I don't want to waste a pick on a quarterback for the most part. And hey, there is exceptions to the rule. Like Malik Willis in the 3rd round, I would take a swing on him. Now we found out later when we were in Detroit, we asked some people in Detroit, was there any real smoke of him, real chance of him coming here? And they're like, nah, I couldn't spit out a playbook. Those are type of things that we can't see from the outside in without being sourced up to the draft community. And then Jalen Hurts, who, hey, I didn't think was going to succeed, but hey, he had talent and he's made the most out of it. So no, I don't think taking a quarterback on day 2 or day 3 is worth it. Argue with your grandmother. Next question. NYG fan and CLT at CLT_NY. That's Research Rick. The owners' meeting starts this weekend. If you could ask John Mayer, Joe Schoen, and Brian Daboll one question each, what would you ask? So for John Mayer, because I'm not really looking for like a great answer from John Mayer, I'm just trying to pressure him. This is my question for John Mayer. Tim McDonald, your nephew, has been with the regime for 11 years. The Giants have the 4th worst record in the NFL during that time. What has he done to be the director of player personnel, which is a high position? Right now, I know they're not going to fire Tim McDonald and stuff, but I want the pressure to be on the nepotism of guys in high spots. I don't give a shit if, you've got somebody, working finances or whatever. But director of player personnel is a huge position, and it's his nephew. And I don't know if this is true. I saw someone tweet about it a few weeks ago. I tried to find it and see, but I think he's like the least experienced director of player personnel in the NFL. I don't know if that's true. I can't back that up. I'm sure if you were the person who tweeted that out and have that information, reply to the podcast episode tweet tomorrow or when you're listening to this. So that I would just want to piss off Mayer. For Joe Schoen, I would say, are you going to take a quarterback in the draft? No, just kidding. I hate when they ask that shit. He's given the same answer 25 times. Stop asking it. I know you have to ask about it so you can put it in your articles, but it's just useless. It's a useless question for me. My question for Joe Schoen would be, are you comfortable going into the NFL draft for the 3rd straight time needing a starting offensive lineman? Right? Like we talked about that before. Like they needed a tackle in 2020 2022 when he first came here. They needed a guard. Now Ben Bredesen was on the roster and ended up becoming the starter, but he was a 3rd stringer going, at the start of camp. So that wasn't so they drafted Josh Azudu. Last year they needed John Michael. They had no center. They had no center besides what's his name? The guy from the Steelers. His name is escaping me. J.C. Hassenauer, right? But that wasn't a real. They just had no center on the roster. When Daniel Jones was doing his, workouts in Arizona with the players, they had Ben Bredesen taking snaps. To me, that wasn't an answer. So, and then this year, I think they need a starting guard. So that would be my question for Joe Schoen. For Brian Daboll, which I think this would be the most important question out of all of them, is what self-reflection have you done to stop a repeat of a Wink Martindale situation? Right? He hasn't talked to the media since the day after the season when he said that he expects Wink Martindale to be back. I do think he should be pressed on that because despite the fact that I think Wink did more wrong in that relationship, but we know the stuff with Mike Kafka, I think Daboll needs to have self-reflection or there won't be the exact same repeat because you're not going to get a personality like Wink Martindale, but you're going to have guys not going to have the support of the guys in the building. So All right, last question. Aaron Spagnuolo. Hey, we had some good time on this one. Andrew Spagnuolo at Andrew Spagnuolo 5. When you are evaluating giving a player a grade, do you care more about traits or production? I know a little bit of both comes in play, but which do you lean for more important? So it depends on what position you're talking about. Linebacker and safety, I need to see the production. I'm not just looking at the stats, but like I need to see the production on the field. Those are positions where your mind is the most important thing. Like you have to have a baseline of some athleticism, but like a 4.7 linebacker who understands the game is faster than a 4.5 linebacker that doesn't. And same thing with safety position. Like Jamin Davis, linebacker with great traits, can't play the position, right? He's very slow. He's slow. Like, you know, I had him as a 3rd rounder in that draft. And, you know, he went one pick before the Giants in that draft when the Giants drafted Kadarius Toney, and Dave Gettleman went on NFL Network saying, "Oh, it was between Davis and Kadarius Toney," which was like the point I was relieved. I would rather have Davis now because, again, as we established, Kadarius Toney is the dumbest person in the NFL, but I didn't want him. And then like a guy like Nick Cross, right? He was a safety out of Maryland. The Colts drafted him 2 years ago. Great athlete, right? Amazing. But he just didn't know what he was doing on the field. And, you know, I haven't been keeping up with his career on the Colts. But, you know, we watched that Colts Texans game at the end of the regular season that decided who would win the division. And on like the first drive of the game, they had this big touchdown to Nico Collins. And they showed the dots, you know, the next gen dots. The safety crashes down on Dalton Schultz. And like, what the hell is this safety doing? And then I see it's Nick Cross. I'm like, okay, that makes sense. It's Nick Cross. He has no idea what he's doing. So with safety and linebacker, film production is what matters the most. For QB, traits are the prerequisite. Then it goes to how do you operate as a passer, right? Like, it's simple. Like, what are your weaknesses? Like, are these weaknesses fixable? Have they been fixable for other guys? You know, if the production isn't there, why not? Like with Daniel Jones. Like, Daniel Jones threw the ball deep at the same rate in college as JJ McCarthy, but Daniel Jones had all the drops, and it was insane. So it's how fixable it is. For every other position, it's the traits or ability, and then technique, like wide receiver, tight end, offensive line, defensive line. Like, I'm looking, hey, do you have the prerequisites of at least solid traits and then technique? Now, there's some guys where the technique is great and they're going above what their traits would give other players. I think those players are useful, but it's like, how are the traits at least to an average level? And then with that perfect technique, then you're a draftable player. But then you're usually looking at those guys in like the 2nd or 3rd round, where if they had the technique to go with it, then they'd be 1st round players. And if your technique is bad, does it look unfixable? Does it look like it's because of a matter of laziness, right? Like, does this technique look bad because it's like, it doesn't look like you put the work in? Or is it like, hey, you got to fix some little stuff, like Andrew Thomas, right? Like, that's one reason I loved Andrew Thomas, because people talk about, oh, he's got some bad technique. You know, he drops his inside foot back, he lunges with his punch. But I was like, that's why I love him, because he played better than all these other guys versus better competition, yet he still has some very fixable things to be worked on. So those are the things I look at. So that's the end of it. That's the lesson. That's the last question for the solo mailbag. So let me know what you think and how we did. I really thought we were going to, at about 15, 20 minutes, I thought we were going to breeze through this. But I'm looking at the clock right now. We're at about 53 minutes. So good stuff. I thought about talking about Saquon Barkley and the hate he's getting. So I have like a pretty good read on Saquon, and he is just very sensitive. He would be best off just getting offline, right? Because he reads everything, and I'm telling you guys, like, I know I like have it pretty good. Like, he just reads everything, right? Like, take my word on that. And you see it, right? You see him replying to stuff. You know, like the fact, like when the franchise tag, when he, when they didn't get a contract done last offseason, he was on Twitter arguing with people about his contract and stuff like that, and saying, "Oh, this isn't true. This isn't true." Saying, "Oh, this is taken out of context." But like, he's just sensitive, and I think he would be better. Like, you're an NFL player. You don't need to be on Twitter. If you need to tweet out some promotional stuff or have an active profile, just tweet it and don't look at your notifications or what people are saying, because it really does bother him. I don't know how he's going to handle this year, because Giants fans hate him, and hey, you should dislike him as an Eagle. I think some of the reaction to like the daughter thing, even though if that hard to believe. I think is a little over the top. Like people are treating this guy like he's some piece of shit. Like I think that's a very over the top. But at the end of the day, just Saquon should just go do his job to the best of his ability and not worry about, like, that's just what fandom is, right? Like, once you go to the Eagles, people aren't going to like you, right? No matter how much they liked you for 6 years, they're just not going to like you. Like, that even goes with, like, the podcast, right? Like, if there's been someone that's been listening, now it's not all, right? There's exceptions. But, like, there could be someone who's liked this podcast for 4 years. If we have like 3 episodes, like if free agency just went and we didn't like what they were doing in free agency, and we came on and talked about it, gave our opinion, people are like, oh, you think you know better than the GM? You gotta ignore that noise and try and do the best job possible. Hey, it'd be crazy if he struggles and gets injured. It's gonna be really hard for him to navigate Eagles fans hating him and Giants fans hating him. That's what'll look crazy. So. Appreciate you guys. Let me check on the chat. Maybe I'll just talk with them offline, the Patreon chat. All right. So appreciate you guys. We'll be back Tuesday. I think I got a message. I'm going to try and get Dan Duggan on the show. Tweet at Nick Filato because he's saying he has to move next week. And he's like, I don't know if I can do our mid-round draft prospect podcast. Everyone loves that. So go tweet at Nick Filato to make some time and jump on the show with me. So, appreciate you guys. We'll see you on the next episode. Tweet at Justin too. Say hope you feel better, Justin, because we do hope he feels better. We'll see you then. Enjoy your weekend. Until then, let's go Big Blue.